Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. Okay, today's episode is deeply personal for me. And I'm very nervous about doing this episode. I'm very nervous about sharing this with all of you because I keep a lot of my personal life private as best as I can, especially as somebody who's deeply visible online. And I'm one of those people that truly believes in privacy. I always get asked by clients, how much should you share? Should you share everything? And I've always told my clients and coach on this notion of you get to share what you fully believe that you want to share when you are ready to share it. You don't have to share from the wound, you can share from the scar, but ultimately, your privacy is your privacy. And so that's kind of like how I live my life when it comes to my brand and my personal brand and my business that I've cultivated for over a decade. But I'm also a human. And I'm also a leader. So it was really important for me to share my story, my human experience with you today, because I know that there are other women that are listening to this episode that have followed me for a whole decade or maybe have just stumbled upon my brand. But I do know that there are other women out there who may be experiencing the same things that I am currently going through. And I also know that there are a lot of self-employed entrepreneurs who are navigating all of the complexities about being high achieving, being ambitious, maybe being in your 30s, late 30s, and having to understand how to make a decision around fertility, reproductive care, and healthcare in general as a self-employed. And many of the times we all feel very alone when trying to make those decisions. And if you are high achieving like me and you're always prioritizing business first or trying to figure out what's next in your next era, and what if this happens? I can't slow down. I want to keep building, blah, blah, blah. It's deeply nerve-wracking. I got you. I am here for you. Two of my core values with what my brand stands for are leadership with purpose and equity and representation. And as somebody who is deeply an advocate for reproductive health, reproductive justice, entrepreneurship, healthcare, and Latinas in business, I knew that I really needed to come and do this episode with full transparency and vulnerability. And this is the most I've ever been. So buckle up. But I have to remind myself that that's why I have this podcast. That's why it's called Unapologetically Visible. I have to remind myself that it is I who created this, who has made this as a brave and safe space. Just like I make all of the other spaces that I have in person, it is a brave and safe space. And mind you, as soon as I post my post on Instagram, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to come to my Instagram and to this podcast, and they're wanting to know the chisme. I mean, it's kind of already started. I've been hinting it, and I got a couple of texts. And so I want you to know that this is not about chisme. This is not about like, oh my God, what is going on in her life? What's going on in her business? This episode today is truly about advocacy and educating ourselves, especially around the topic of fertility and fibroids. So my goal with this episode is to be able to share my journey, to educate others, and to be a bridge for advocacy around reproductive care, reproductive justice for our entrepreneurs and our Latinas out there, where a lot of this stuff, like talking about our periods, talking about fertility, talking about even menopause, is taboo. It is so hush hush. And in fact, my grandma didn't even believe she went through menopause. And so this is why this episode and my platform exist, especially anybody who's out there who is very high achieving and wondering how to make the decision of when it is the right time to start a family, and also wondering what's going to happen next with your ambition, with your business, and holding space for all the complexities about that. So if you are listening to this podcast episode right now, you might be listening to it the day before I have my robotic myomectomy surgery to remove my uterine fibroids, to check on any endometriosis, and to see if my fallopian tubes are open. Ooh, that was a mouthful to say. You might be listening to this episode on the day of my surgery, and you might be listening to this episode 1 week after my surgery and the next weeks to follow, as this is a two-parter episode. This is only part one. There's another episode coming about, it's a two-parter. But whenever you are listening to this episode, I want you to hear directly from me. I want you to know my truth and my story, my journey, and for us to be better advocates for each other, to stand up, to speak out, and to hold space for all of the complexities of our ambition, our journey to motherhood, our journey to parenthood, and also to hold space for people who choose not to have kids, but that also can be a support system for those who choose to, and advocate, most importantly, advocate for better healthcare and for better research and programs, and maybe just hold space for all of those complexities. So I want to start this podcast by saying I'm 34. I'm a wife. My husband and I are almost celebrating 8 years in marriage. We celebrate 8 years of marriage in December. I'm also an award-winning coach and a TEDx speaker and an entrepreneur who's been building and expanding my businesses for over a decade. When I got married, I was maybe about 2 years into my business. And so at that point, I was 26, and starting a family was never a never. Like, I knew I wanted a child or to have children. I always say a child just because I'm an only child. So sometimes it's like, all right, start with one, right? But I already knew, like, that was the path that I was going to go down. It just was not a priority. It was never a priority. It was always like, this is going to be a later conversation. My husband and I agreed, right? Pete and I fully agreed that we were just going to spend 5 years of our marriage being husband and wife. And I fully still love that decision. I fully am so grateful for that decision, because for the first 5 years of our marriage, we traveled. We were focused on our careers. We were just living la vida loca, if you would, but not really, but you know what I mean. But 5 years we agreed upon to just be husband and wife and enjoy our marriage flew by. Like, it flew by like that. Maybe it was the pandemic. And that decision about starting a family became more real. And every single decision became more real. Okay. September of 2023. It was the night before I was going to give my keynote speech in Lawton, Oklahoma at a women's business summit. That was the night that I experienced the worst night of my life. And I was alone. I was in a small town in Oklahoma. And at the time, I was pushing through the pain. I was pushing through the heavy bleeding, whatever it felt like, fever and knives stabbing me. I bucked up because I knew that I had to wake up at 6:30 a.m. I had to get dressed and put on my makeup and show up ready to give this keynote. So I did what any hustler decides to do, and I bucked up. I knew that I could not say no because they had paid me for this keynote. I was there to fulfill my commitment of giving this keynote speech, but I was in so much pain. I was bleeding very heavily, and I did not know what was going on in my life at that time. So at 6:30 a.m., I did what any hustler does. And I got dressed. I took the ibuprofen. I got on my Instagram stories. I said hello to my audience like if nothing was wrong. I looked fabulous on camera. And I delivered my 60-minute keynote to an audience of maybe about 150 to 200 women in Oklahoma. And then I got on a plane and I came back to San Antonio. And I did that within 48 hours. But the bleeding never stopped. In fact, it kept going. And it kept getting heavier, and it lingered for 30 plus days. And at that time, I had lost my health insurance because I was on Pete's former employer's group health insurance. And so when I got married at 26. So I was already off of my parents' health insurance. And of course, I had a spouse. So I went on to his health insurance and never had to worry about self-employment insurance and all that mess. But at that time, when he unexpectedly got laid off, there went our health insurance. So that time in between from July of 2023 to the end of the year, I had no health insurance. And so it was a struggle and a fight to find an OBGYN that could take me in because my previous OBGYN was in my college town. And up until that point, I would only visit her whenever I would have my annual wellness exam. So I never had to worry about trying to find an OBGYN in San Antonio because why, right? Even though I knew starting a family was going to be a priority. And so finally, I found a great clinic in the medical center here in San Antonio. But over time, through heavier cycles, fatigue, constant urination, pressure in my pelvic area, especially a lot of pain, heavy cramps, I realized that something wasn't right. And mind you, I started my menstrual cycle when I was 10 years old. And I had really heavy menstrual cycles, even as a teenager, a kid, you name it. So for me, like having heavy bleeding was just this normal part of my life. Like I never thought that this was something serious. I just thought like, oh, okay, well, this has happened to me since I was 10. Why would it make it any difference at 34 or 32, 33? So I realized that something wasn't right. But of course, because I lost my health insurance, I had to wait until marketplace insurance enrollment opened up, which thankfully was in January of 2024 when I finally had my own health insurance. And so since I finally had my own health insurance, I went back to my OBGYN. We did all of my annual wellness exams and we had a pelvic exam. And it was in that moment that I knew that I needed to get an ultrasound. However, it still took months to get that ultrasound. It took 1 year later to the date of when I had that worst night of my life. So finally, in September of 2024, the ultrasound confirmed that I had 4 uterine fibroids all over my uterus. And they were the sizes of 9 centimeters to 4 centimeters. Fibroids that for years I didn't even know were there, which explained why so many of the symptoms I was having, especially the worst night of my life, was affecting my fertility and potentially creating infertility. So I'm a tiny person. And I have no idea where these fibroids are hiding because I didn't have any weight gain, nor did I have any protrudence of these fibroids. If you were to look at me, you could definitely tell they're hiding because they're nowhere to be found. However, just to give you some perspective, my biggest fibroid that's now measuring, it kind of degenerated, but it's now measuring at 8 centimeters. It is the size of a softball. The second biggest one is the size of a baseball. And then the third and the fourth, with a potentially fifth, we don't know, could be a cluster, are the sizes of grapefruits and lemons. And my uterus size and width, it is the same size and width as someone who is finishing their first trimester in pregnancy. Woo! Okay, and uterine fibroids, by the way, are non-cancerous tumors that are inside the uterus. They're muscle growth, so they're kind of really hard, but thankfully, they are non-cancerous. However, if you leave them in there for a long period of time, it could really damage your uterus. With these fibroids, they really needed to be removed for the chance of having a healthy outcome for conception and pregnancy. And when my OBGYN went through the ultrasound results with me, she kept saying that she wanted for me to have an open myomectomy. And at that time, I had no freaking clue what a myomectomy was, what the difference is between a robotic one and an open one. But what I learned through that little time frame that we were asking questions was an open myomectomy is essentially a C-section without having a baby. And it's essentially where they would open you up like if you are going in to have a C-section where they would remove the uterine fibroids. It's a little bit more complex surgery with a longer recovery. And something in my heart told me that that was not the answer. I knew that I could continue to advocate and continue to get a second opinion, especially doing a little bit more of a robotic laparoscopic procedure. I knew that that needed to happen. But as self-employed, our health insurance, or my health insurance in particular, isn't exactly the best, especially when I needed to get referrals from my PCP to see a fertility specialist and dealing with all of the out-of-pocket costs and copays, and sometimes even missing out work because the pain and the heavy bleeding was so intense that there was no way I could actually put regular clothes on and get myself to my office to be able to work. And on top of this, when you're self-employed and you have insurance and all these things, sometimes it is a waiting game. You have to manage your health insurance if you don't get it from your spouse's employer. You have to continue to work because if you miss out on money and productivity, that's going to be really harmful in the long run. And for fibroids in general, there have been little advances to having more effective research and advocacy and support programs. So for many high-achieving women, especially Latina and Black women, we are living in a silent tension. We're running our companies and leading our teams, showing up for our clients. Meanwhile, our bodies are waving red flags, begging us to listen to it, begging us to slow down, begging us to seek help, to ask for help, and to know when something is not right, to go and discover what the hell is going on with our bodies. When you're self-employed, a diagnosis with your health or even your reproductive health just doesn't affect your overall well-being. It touches on your finances, it touches on your calendar, it touches on your confidence. Every single appointment you have to do means that you have to take time off. And sometimes we could be sitting in waiting rooms for over 2 hours just trying to get seen or even trying to get an appointment. Oh my goodness, the ability to just try to get an appointment when I was bleeding for 30 days, when all the doctors were telling me just go to the emergency room, when I knew like I didn't need to go to emergency room. I need to see a doctor to figure out what the hell is going on, right? All of that means taking time off. And every exam that you have to take means more out-of-pocket bills, more medical expenses. And while insurance covers some things, it doesn't cover all of the things, especially when it comes to copays or ultrasounds, MRIs, all of that emotional labor of staying strong when your body is screaming for rest is intense. And I do feel like in the last 2 years, navigating business transitions and figuring out if what I'm doing is in alignment with where I'm going while also navigating my fertility and our infertility has been one of the most exhausting emotional, mental, physical tolls that it's taken on me. And it has caused me to be severely impacted on my business and how I run it and how I mentally am stable enough to be able to do that, also financially. So getting to this exact moment with surgery and going through the surgery, especially while my business revenue was up and down in the last 2 years, where I had so much mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial toll, getting to this moment that I'm in is 25 months in the making. 25 months. That's insane. From seeing my OBGYN to getting second opinions with a fertility clinic and doing all of the preconception testing to having 4 ultrasounds, 3 pelvic exams, an MRI, and multiple blood tests, which you know that I hate my blood tests. I hate blood work. But balancing the crazy effects of not having a stellar year in business and navigating all of this has been a challenge. And I don't give myself enough credit for being super strong, because I do feel like if anybody would have experienced the craziest year that I've had, you guys would have been enough. Like, I do not know how I did not give up in my business or just like with all this stuff. And I want to say that many women who are listening here, they do not have 25 months. They don't have this because, I'm fortunate that my fibroids are not severely impacting me in the way that I know and that I've seen fibroids impact other women. There's tons of videos on TikTok that I've seen. And so I do know that a lot of women do not have 25 months. So I want to talk about the reality. Let's talk about it, right? This is the part that rarely makes it into entrepreneurship when we have these discussions. And in fact, that's why at Hustle and Socialize 2025, it was super important for me to have a panel around entrepreneurship and motherhood because one, there needs to be more conversation, not just on motherhood in general, but like the ultimate like village that it takes to be ambitious and have and make these decisions while also navigating different complexities. So the part that rarely gets talked about in entrepreneurship and the glossy Instagram wellness posts that you see, or even the employer handbooks around just women and reproductive care. So according to the Fibroid Foundation, over 26 million women in the United States are living with fibroids right now, some of which don't even know that they are living with fibroids. Up to 80% of women will develop fibroids by the age of 50. Fibroids can grow back even after surgical removal. You can advocate for a robotic or an open myomectomy or other minimally invasive surgical procedures to preserve your fertility. But one of the only ways for fibroids to not return is if you make a decision to have a hysterectomy or when you go through menopause. Black women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be diagnosed than white women, often at very younger ages with larger and more symptomatic fibroids. And yet 36% of Black women and 22% of Hispanic Latina women believe that they aren't at risk, even though prevalence is higher in our communities. Fibroid symptoms can be debilitating. They can cause heavy bleeding that can lead to anemia, fatigue, bloating, pelvic pain, pressure on other organs like our bowels and the ability to urinate on our bladder. And it also causes infertility and pregnancy risk. Fibroids are estrogen dominant and are also hereditary. However, there's still not enough research. We have still not made enough advancements to understand what the actual causes and getting to the root of why fibroid growth occurs. Your diet may play a factor because it is estrogen dominant. We can look at different things like the amount of red meat we consume, the amount of dairy, all the different factors like eating, artificial sugars and different things like that. We could look at all those causes, but we still don't have actual pinpoint of how fibroids occur. So again, not enough research. The Fibroid Foundation, along with Senator Cory Booker, was tasked with trying to pass a bipartisan bill for fibroid research and awareness. However, it failed to gain traction. But beyond the physical toll, the economic impact is staggering. Over $34 billion in U.S. healthcare costs and $17 billion are lost in productivity every single year because of fibroids. Women with fibroids will miss more work, will lose out on income, and will bear invisible burdens that compound over time. I am deeply privileged to be able to be my own CEO, be my own boss, because as my own boss, I can take time and maneuver my schedule to really work best with my recovery. However, those in corporate or who work 9-to-5 jobs have to be back at work within 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even 2 weeks because they can't take a full month off. And so it really is difficult on people who do work in corporate, who do work a 9-to-5, because they don't have the capabilities of moving their schedule around. But of course, being an entrepreneur also comes with a cost. So even though I have the privilege of recovering on my time and working with my clients to make sure that they're also taken care of and I'm also taken care of, if you're an entrepreneur or self-employed, we know that there is no paid medical leave. especially in the state of Texas. I've done a lot of research, y'all. We do not have any FMLA for self-employed individuals. We don't have HR departments unless you're a big company. If you're a solopreneur like me, if you're maybe like a team of 1 or 2 contractors, we don't have a big HR department that's handling our benefits for us. It's just us, our bodies, our business, our bills. And even though a robotic myomectomy is a minimally invasive surgery, it's still a major surgery with general anesthesia. And whether it is robotic or open, a myomectomy can cost anywhere between $11,000 to $25,000 or more, depending on the hospital, the approach, the surgeon, and your insurance coverage. That number does not include travel or medical options, childcare if you need childcare, time off of work, and post-op supplies, or even the weeks of recovery where you are physically and mentally unable to show up in your normal self. So when we talk about reproductive health, when we talk about reproductive justice, we rarely talk about these real costs. The stress of waiting for an approval from to be able to get that referral for the specialist. I had to wait almost 2 months to get a referral for a surgeon to see a surgeon. The fear of insurance not covering our exams because we haven't hit our deductible or whatever the hell we have to hit. Those balances that we incur that are out of pocket, and any business debt that we owe or any business expense, it is a lot. The pressure to stay strong, to show up for yourself, for your clients, for your team, for your business, when your body and your bank account are both stretched thin. It is a lot. This is the part of women's health that doesn't make it into the pamphlets. This is why it's so important to continue to advocate for reproductive health. And while I believe in my heart of heart that my decision to have surgery is going to be worth it and is worth it, even though I know that I have a 60 to 65% chance of fibroid regrowth, especially if I want to have a successful outcome of getting pregnant. They do have a potential of growing back as, of course, pregnancy has estrogen and all the other hormones that you're going to have. I know that this is the right decision for me to be able to even think about the possibility of parenthood and becoming a mom. And so a lot of this feels burdensome. A lot of this is so much weight that we have to have, but we need more programs and we need more support. We need more preparation to understand all of the layers that come with addressing fibroids and endometriosis and endometriosis, ovarian cysts, ovarian cancers, you name it. My husband's layoff and my fibroid diagnosis arrived at the same time, and together they completely shifted my entire foundation of how I see success and how I'm building my business. We've had to have real hard conversations about our finances, about our family planning, about boundaries, about what we do want to share, what we don't want to share. When someone asks us, hurry up, it's time to have kids, or when you're having kids, like how do we approach that? By the way, the holidays are coming up and it is never appropriate to ever ask someone when they are going to get pregnant. Just let them be, y'all. Let them be. You have no idea what is going on in someone's world. But through all of this, I realized that I can no longer build a business that demands that I abandon my body to prove my worth. That if I focus so much on the validation and the hustle and the burnout that it caused, I'm not in a good pathway to any type of success. I can't keep treating my health like an inconvenience to my calendar. If anything, this whole 25 months has reminded me that our bodies are the first businesses that we will ever lead. Our health is our wealth. And if we collapse, then our businesses collapse and everything follows. And we are not a service to ourselves, the people that we service to, and the legacy that we are building. So to every person listening, especially my high-achieving, emotionally mature Latina and women of color founders, I want you to really internalize this and to really hear this. You do not have to earn rest through exhaustion. You don't have to delay motherhood, partnership, or healing in order to prove your power. You get to build differently. You get to build with everything that you want. If you are navigating your own health concern right now, here's where I would start. First, self-advocacy is a non-negotiable. Please, please, please get the second opinion. Ask the uncomfortable questions. When I came to my surgeon, I had a list of questions that I was going to ask to make sure that I felt safe, supported, and really ready to make a decision to move forward with surgery. Do not let anyone rush you or dismiss you that your symptoms are just normal and that you need to just take the ibuprofen and just get on with your day. It's a tough period. Don't even dare for 1 second let anybody dismiss your symptoms. Keep pushing, keep asking, keep doing your research. And don't let anybody rush you as well with your timeline. Divine timing is super real. When it will happen, when everything's going to fall into place is the divine timing. If somebody is making comments about when you're going to start having kids, when you're going to do XYZ, please do everything that you can to shut them up. For years, I normalized pain because I was too busy to pause. I never really liked going to the doctor. I always was afraid of getting poked, of getting exams, doing all the things. But you are your own best advocate and you are your own best data. So second, honor your body's timeline. Entrepreneurship teaches us to sprint, to get all the things in a very fast-paced timeline. But healing really requires surrender. If you are in a season where your health requires you to take a step back, it is okay. Your business will wait. Your health will not. It's also important to know that building systems and support around you is key. You need to delegate and automate and pause if you must. Again, your business is always going to be there. Do not sacrifice your well-being just for momentum. And third, plan for the practical. Talk to your accountant. Talk to your partner, your clients. Budget not just for surgery costs or time off, but for healing and recovery, and emotionally prepare for those quiet, uncomfortable moments. All of the release, all of the grief, all of the things that come from the emotional weight that this has, because your healing brings that stillness. And in stillness, it can feel really uncomfortable, especially when you are in constant motion and you have to slow down. That is where the real recalibration begins. When you give yourself permission to slow down, you start to rebuild from your truth, not from pressure, and you get the clarity that you need to step into your next era. You begin to create a different business model that can really hold the fullness of your whole life, whether it's a business model that honors your humanity, your marriage, your desire for motherhood, and your future legacy. Leadership isn't just about showing up, doing all the things, going to all the events, looking prim and perfect for the Instagram, for the social media. Leadership is really about leading yourself through the tough, fucking hard seasons that you never, ever had planned for. So as I prepare for my surgery, or if you're listening to us, I'm hopefully on the other side. And as I enter this new decade in business and this new chapter, I'm carrying these two truths all at once. I am deeply scared, but I am extremely grateful. I am very uncertain about what is next, but I am extremely grounded. And I'm still that ambitious Christina. However, I'm now building from a place that truly honors my body just as much as my brilliance. In next week's episode, which is part 2 of the conversation, I'm going to share exactly how I prepared, how I made informed decisions, how I got multiple medical options and opinions, how I prepared my business and my body through fitness and wellness and nutrition, and how I really focused on making preparations for my personal life while also reorganizing my client load for my recovery. Healing is not all physical. It's very strategic. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone who you love, who may be going through a difficult time right now in their health, and DM me on Instagram. at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe and your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I'll personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.